So the the great tool in psychological challenge is what we call heat experiences. So heat experiences may happen for you incidentally, but what we're referring to here is a deliberately staged experience that stretches or challenges your familiar sense making categories in order to make room for a new, more complex, more enabling sense making category.
So you could say that, again, this goes back to a comment I made a moment ago, that, oftentimes what gets in the way of us being able to evolve toward more complex sense making is what we already know. I can't remember who it was who said, I think it was probably Mark Twain, the American author, who said, it's not what we don't know that gets us into trouble. It's what we know is true. And we're convinced that it's true. And, anything outside of that is, bullshit or, esoteric or whatever. So, and we all have life's heat experiences. We have deaths of love. We have death of loved ones. We have loss of jobs. We have all kinds of things that happen in life that have the capacity to generate a heat experience. By the way, it's not guaranteed that they do, right? It depends on how we relate to those experiences. And as I just want to amplify that, what Antoinette is saying here is that we want to be able to create, to deliberately stage heat experiences such that they help people to become more aware of the current sense-making constraints and come to a place of being able to choose, choicefully engage in perhaps a different kind of sense-making paradigm. Yeah, that's right, Francois. Thank you. You can always leave it to Francois. Thank you. Okay, so great. So we can identify, we can talk about three kinds of heat experiences. And by the way, I wouldn't say that we have the corner on this. In other words, I'm not going to say that we know all there is about this, or a lot of people who do this sort of work. This is just our take, and it's almost like our current take, right? So this is the way in which we talk about this stuff, and the way in which people practice this stuff will help evolve and probably improve the way that we describe it. But here's how we see it now. That three kinds of heat experience. One is situational, which is to create or to engineer, I like the word engineer, sort of situational breakdowns. So situations that challenge people in a way, but within a context in which people can relate to that challenge as a developmentally significant heat experience. So like, and we'll go over some examples, but like, one example could be like a lateral job move. Like sometimes you might be working, say, in technology, and you might laterally move into product design. And that could present, does not necessarily, depends on how it's engineered, that could present a kind of heat experience, in that you're going to have to kind of reshuffle the way that you make sense of things in this new role. So that's situational. The second one is cognitive, and you could also call it epistemological if you have a penchant for philosophical language. I use the word cognitive, it's a little simpler to understand, but basically cognitive heat experience is one in which you stand and a familiar category gets directly challenged. Like for instance, if you're talking with someone who's a kind of control freak and you posit to them in a serious way, so it's got to be done in a serious way. There's a lot of other things that have to be present in order for a heat experience to happen. By the way, among the things that need to be present is psychological support We're not going to talk about that, but that's the other dimension. It's the yin and yang. You need them both, really, right? But presented in the right way, you could say, you could posit to a control freak at exactly the right moment, something like, so have you considered that the less in control you are, the more in control you are? What might that present for you? So that would be an example of a cognitive, that's like a reframe. It's a term in coaching we call reframe, which is just presenting a different way of looking at something that is like, oh, I never thought of that. Or, oh, you've got to be out of your mind. So that would be a cognitive heat experience.
Sorry.
And then the third.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael. We have a slight technical hitch here, but you carry on, please.
Okay. Okay. All right. So emotional heat experiences, one in which, and this is again is where it really takes a kind of loving hand, a kind of real like, and we're going to talk about some of the sort of skills and that you need to be able to bring about in order to facilitate a heat experience. So an emotional heat experience is one in which a person a person is invited to be present with an emotion that's very difficult. And oftentimes what we see and what most of us have probably experienced is that when we can simply stay with an emotion long enough, we can get to what it is that emotion is revealing, what aspect of our sense making that isn't working, for instance, or our meaning making that isn't working. But most of the time when confronted with a difficult emotion, we have some way to avoid being present. And I remember having a brilliant teacher say one time that oftentimes crying is one of the great ways that human beings avoid being present to the feeling. I thought that was an incredibly provocative thing to say. But then I did some research with it and worked with other people, and I've come to discover that we could spin out. So having an emotional heat experience that allows us to experience something long enough to be able to get to the other side of it is another form of heat experience.